Yo, what is up guys, Ghost here, and today we've just received the brand new update notes for update 5.0, which is of course going to be releasing on Wednesday with Season 5, and in this video I wanted to go over all of the maybe more unheard of things, the nitty gritty, some of the smaller but definitely more impactful changes that some of you guys may not have heard about. Now, as you know, I've already made several videos going over the squad management system, the changes coming to Irish, Dozer, you know, the new map, the new weapons and all of that stuff, so I'm not going to spend any time telling you guys what you already know is coming, and instead we're just going to jump into all the smaller details that you may have otherwise missed. Before we begin though, if you guys do enjoy the content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. I am going to be covering Season 5 as extensively as possible. There should be a lot of interesting stuff to try out and to create content on, so expect to see some fun stuff there. As always, thank you guys for your ongoing support. Okay, so let's just jump straight in here and talk about the fact that DICE are finally listening and they're going to make the guns more skillful. So, as you guys will know, guns in Battlefield 2042, you don't really have to burst them at all. In fact, they have so little spread and so little recoil that you can beam people across maps with certain weapons, RM68, I'm looking at you, from pretty much anywhere on the map. DICE gives some reasoning here, saying that the reason that was the case is because the maps used to be so large, and since they've now been reworked, and in most cases the maps have been made smaller, so it feels like you can beam people even easier now that the areas of play have become a little bit less. So what they say here is that you'll notice that the maximum dispersion has now been increased by an average of 15 to 20%, and the weapons will now reach that maximum dispersion level when they reach half of the magazine while on full auto and full spray mode. So what that essentially means is, say you have a 30 round magazine, by the time you get to 15 rounds left in there, you are going to have reached that full extra dispersion, and at that point it's probably going to be worth it for you to stop firing and reburst. If I'm honest, it's probably going to be before halfway through the magazine. You know, it depends on the weapon how much this extra percentage of dispersion is really going to have an effect, but I guess we're going to wait and see with that. In any case, I definitely think DICE are barking up the right tree here. Gunplay in Battlefield 2042 really just doesn't have that much skill to it, and they have been taking the right steps here to address that, so let's hope that they keep on going down that road. Another good little option that they've changed here is the damage numbers. So currently you can display the amount of damage that you deal to an enemy if you don't kill them, and now they've added a few additional options to allow you to change the visibility of the number. So, you know, where that number is displayed. Is it in the center of the screen? Is it down to the bottom where the kill feed is? And you can also change the size of it as well, and then you've got two offsets, one for horizontal and one for vertical, so you can really fine tweak it and get those numbers exactly where you like. For me, I'm definitely going to have it around where my crosshair is, because I just like to have that information, and I play on you know, a pretty large monitor, so it's kind of nice to have it closer to my eye line. I have covered this next one before in a previous video, but just to go over it if the game feels a little bit funny, they've made several changes to the camera sprint movement in the game, and in particular when you're using like the tactical sprint. And these changes are supposed to better reflect you being a soldier and give you a little bit more weight to the way that your character moves. And this is going to be different depending on the weapon you're holding. So are you holding an assault rifle? Are you holding an RPG? And they also go on to say here that there are some golden rules to camera motion in FPS games that ensure your understanding of where you are in space, aligned with what the camera tells you. And they've taken the opportunity here to improve that further by focusing on rotations of the camera rather than translations, which is like the camera moving left, right, up and down. Now, if for whatever reason you don't like these changes, I think they're going to be on as default. There is going to be an option in the menu where you can turn that off. So if you jump in game and you're just like, well, what is this new movement? I don't like this at all. You can turn that off. Another option like that is the ADS field of view. So for those of you who don't know, ADS field of view basically ties your ADSing field of view to your general field of view that you set. So if you set your field of view as 90 like I do, whenever you ADS, it's going to try its best to keep your FOV at 90 as well. This option used to be off by default, but it is now on. So when you log in, you might feel that aiming is a little bit different. And this is supposed to go hand in hand with the recent changes they made to uniform soldier aiming and having that on as default as well. And it is at least my belief that, well, for me, you know, having uniform soldier aiming on and FOV ADS on leads to the best aim consistency and allowing your brain to sort of build up that muscle memory. So this next change is actually under AI and soldier improvements, but it says the penguins have been tampering with the ranger payload and it will now take more damage from infantry projectiles. Not the penguins, the ranger. So really good change there. I know I have really been irritated so many times by the ranger, it almost feels futile to put any of your precious bullets into that thing because it's just like, why bother? If you don't have an explosive, you're not going to kill it, or even if you do kill it, it usually results in you dying yourself, right? So really good to see that taking less damage there. They've also now changed it so that grenades will no longer detonate from other explosions. This change has been made so that each grenade will now have a set detonation timer, increasing the readability as opposed to a chain reaction style of play. Players will still be able to shoot a grenade with bullets. So previously, you know, if you had one grenade go off and there was a bunch more in there, they would all just sort of chain react and go off together. That's not going to happen anymore, so that's cool. In addition to that, the penguins apparently have been working on their research of the incendiary grenade, and they found a breakthrough that allowed them to increase the radius by 15%. Toasty. I think the reason for this may be because they've buffed Dozer a little bit, and as we all know, one of the direct counters to Dozer is indeed the incendiary, so that could be the reason behind that. I think it's probably one of the more underused grenades as well, so yeah. Also, the concussion grenade has seen quite a lot of changes. In this situation, probably to bring it up to par with the 3 new grenade types that are being added in Season 5. So first of all, recon specialists will now be able to use the concussion grenade. And on top of that, they've kind of increased the range of effectiveness and the duration of it. So the near radius has been increased from 6 to 8 meters. The total radius remains unaffected at 12. And then they've increased the angle of acceptance in order for it to be considered a frontal concussion, where you really take the proper concussive effect, and that's gone up from 60 degrees to 70. The duration at which concussive grenades last has also been increased, so near and frontal facing, if you really take that full blow, that has gone up by half a second. If it's a far away explosion and also front facing, that's gone up by 0.2 of a second, and then if it's a near side one, that's gone up from 0.75 to 0.12 seconds there. Then we've got some changes to the proximity sensor. They admitted here that since they changed the class system, they changed the proxy sensor from being a throwable to a class gadget for the recon class. Well, it's pretty much been bottom of the pack, the least picked gadget in the game, I would go so far as to guess. That being said, they've increased the number of proc sensors that can be carried from 1 to 2. Obviously, the amount that can be deployed has been increased to 2 as well, but then they've actually reduced the radius of them from 20 meters to 15 meters to sort of offset some of those benefits. Now, Casper has seen, you know, maybe a good or a bad change depending on whether you like this or not. Enemy or friendly players can no longer climb upon Casper's drone and fly with it. I've seen so many people messing about doing this in videos and stuff. Of course, it's unintended gameplay. It's kind of like the hovercraft thing. It was funny and ridiculous in equal parts, but when it finally did disappear, there is this little part of me that kind of misses it, even though it was just one of those ridiculous Battlefield 2042 broken things, and that's sort of how I feel about Casper's drone as well. But anyway, it's going out of the game, guys, so if you want to do it, you better get on there quick and give it a go. They've also added thermal vision to his drone as well when you're zooming in, so that seems to be a bit of a theme in this patch, adding thermal vision to lots of things in there, including all the vehicles, which we will get into later. Sundance's anti-armor grenade has been removed from the game, so this is a specialist here that started out with 3 kinds of nade, and what, she's down to 1 now, right? Like, I don't play Sundance, and honestly, I've never played her, but she doesn't have the EMP grenade anymore, right? I'm not like dreaming that happened, right? They removed that, and now they removed the anti-armor nade as well, so basically she just has the scanner nade. So they say here that her anti-armor grenade had poor readability, which would result in vehicle players being unable to detect between an incoming missile or an anti-armor grenade, which resulted in being unable to react suitably with countermeasures. Going forward, the only time you see incoming missile alerts is when it is actually an incoming missile. That actually does make a lot of sense. You know, I fly in this game quite regularly, and it is quite frustrating when you waste your flares on an anti-armor grenade because you think it's actually a missile. There is a little telltale giveaway, and that is that you don't hear the locking on sound. You know, it just instantly locks onto you, and if you hear that, you pretty much know that it's a Sundance anti-armor nade, but most players don't know that. So I do think this change makes sense. After all, we are getting a bunch of new grenades added to the game anyway, so, you know, I know there's definitely going to be some Sundance mains that will be a bit butthurt about this one, though. Okay, moving on to vehicles. Now, there are a lot of vehicles changing here, and I can't hope to cover all of them in this short little video, so I'm going to go over what I see as most of the important ones. I'm not going to cover all of the weapons that have been added and removed from vehicles because, as I say, I've already been over that. So here we've got some general rules that apply to all vehicles. They've improved aiming for passengers while the driver is turning the body of the vehicle, and they've also done a full pass on camera positions on all passenger weapons to ensure they feel similar during gameplay. And then on top of that, they've also added thermal imaging, thermal cameras as an option with the HMG, the minigun, and the LMG, I think, for most of the passenger seats. So I think this is going to be really good, actually. At the moment, you know, it is very, very hard to aim as a passenger if that driver is just going full tilt, full pelt. It can be difficult to hit those targets, so hopefully this is going to make a world of difference here. The air-to-ground missile no longer locks onto empty vehicles, but will keep the lock-on if the enemy player leaves the vehicle during the lock-on sequence. Massive change for me. Again, if you're a jet pilot and you use the AGMs, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You're trying to lock onto a vehicle on the ground, but instead of locking onto the vehicle that actually has somebody in it, it instead locks onto the empty vehicle next to the guy that you want to aim at, and, you know, you have to come around for a second strafe. So that is no longer going to happen anymore. Absolutely fantastic news. For the Wildcat, they have lowered the minimum damage of the Wildcat's default primary weapon, which I believe is the 20mm AA cannons. They've lowered that from 9 to 6. And then the damage fall-off start distance is now set to 250 meters instead. So I'm not sure if this is a nerf or a buff. Like, I kind of feel like the damage fall-off start distance was less than 250 meters, so they've nerfed the minimum damage, but the fall-off distance is probably going to start at a longer range. Moving on to the jets here, so jets will now benefit from rocket pods. Really great change there, definitely gives the various loadouts a little bit more diversity. You will now be able to look back while in the pilot seat of jets. We've always been able to look back in the pilot seat of jets, but I think what they mean here and what they've referred to previously is when you are looking back in that rear view camera, you will still be able to control the jet. That was the problem before. When you were in the rear view camera, you couldn't actually give the plane any inputs. They've reduced the dispersion of the 30mm cannons on the jets, and they've also increased the overheat rate of the 30mm cannons. So 30mm cannons are a bit more accurate now, but they're going to overheat a little bit faster. Maybe they'll actually be decent for infantry as well now. And then they've also updated the third-person perspective camera to be more responsive and precise to your inputs. Going on to the tanks, they have removed Staff Shell Smart Lock-On, and it now instead dumbfires like all other tank shells, but they've added an ability for the Staff Shell to lock onto all laser-designated targets for extra damage. And then the big one for tanks here for me is that they've added an option to decouple the tank turning from aiming. I am planning to make a video on all of these small little tweaks and in-game options, so it will be easier to explain when that video gets up and I've actually got Season 5 in my hands, but trust me, this is a pretty nice change. And then finally here, I'm not 100% on these changes, whether we can take these as legit or not, because the section that they are listed under appears to be for the M1A5, the T-28, and the RAM. But apparently the changes are that they've increased Heatseeker missile damage to air transport vehicles. Now that could be referring to just the RAM. After all, the RAM, one of the passenger seats, does get an air-to-air missile, but as far as I know, neither of the other two vehicles, the two tanks, get that option, so I'm not sure why they were listed under that. Maybe this is like a general option because, of course, jets and helicopters get Heatseekers as well, and actually if the damage to air transport vehicles has been increased there, that's pretty big. But this one doesn't make sense at all. It says they've lowered the accepted angle of radar missiles from 10 to 5. They're not yet done with their response to this, so they're going to see how that plays out. And as far as I know, the only vehicle in the game that gets radar missiles are the jets. So this has probably been placed in the wrong section, and I think both of these things are, you know, to do with all Heatseeker missiles, and then obviously the latter one, only the radar missiles on the jets. Now, I know that was quite a lot of stuff to get through, and before we wrap this one up, I just wanted to mention here, and you've probably noticed, I haven't gone over any weapon changes, and sadly, there aren't really many impactful weapon changes, at least in the update notes, that is worth mentioning. I fully expected to see the upcoming changes to the RM68 and the G57, the nerfs that we've all been waiting for literally an entire season, to be in this first 5.0 update, but they're not here. Maybe they are here, but they're just not in the update notes. I don't know why they would leave out such big changes that they know the community is waiting for. So that therefore gives me no choice but to assume that they aren't coming in update 5.0 and they are instead coming in 5.1 or 5.2. So I know that's going to piss a lot of people off. I mean, I'm just as tired as you guys are of getting killed by the RM68, but hey, you know, it is what it is. Overall here, I think the rest of the patch changes are really great, really good stuff, and I like the way DICE are going with this. I'm just crossing my fingers that we're not just going to end up with a summer patch as the post-Season 5, the beyond Season 5 content, and that's going to be the end of it. But I want to thank you guys for spending some time with me today. As always, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like down below. Of course, subscribe for more Battlefield 2042 Season 5 and beyond, and I will see you guys in the next one.